further delay, let's begin today's event, CX Location Decision Making, Aligning Customer Culture with the Nearshore Destinations Culture. I'd like to introduce your host moderator for today, and that is Kurt Laughlin, Managing Director and Founder, Nearshore Americas. Kirk, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Karen, and I really appreciate you setting that up, and I really appreciate everyone joining us today. This is really, really one of my favorite topics, honestly. I think we're going to have a great conversation, and I'll introduce our speakers in a minute. When we talk about culture, it's so much more, it's such a deeper issue than many people give it credit for. Especially in the IT BPO world that many of us live and work in. There's sort of three areas of culture in my view. There's not just the relationship between a provider and a vendor customer, between a provider and a vendor, but there's also a separate cultural consideration between the provider and the customer's customer. And then the third area, which also is very, very important, is how that provider itself creates a culture, drives a culture and a mission with its own people. And sometimes one of those cultures works and sometimes the other two don't. So it's a matter of really balancing and focusing on three different areas. And we'll get into that conversation today. As many of you on the call know, we're talking really about the nearshore world, the Western Hemisphere of the Americas, and all of the great benefits that we derive from same time zone, proximity, and obviously the third leg of the stool, which we've talked about for a very long time, is cultural alignment. So having said that, I want to thank you for being with us here at Nearshore Americas. Our special guest today is Charlotte Banks, a Director of Vendor Management from Farmers Insurance. Also, Jeff Santana, Director of Operations at the Dominican Republic operation of KM Squared. And also Carol Guzman, KM Squared's Corporate Head of Human Resources. This is also, for you who don't know KM Squared, a great, great time to get to know the organization. Has been a real superstar over the last 15 years or so in the nearshore region in quite a few countries in the Caribbean, as well as Central America and Colombia. So having said all that, we want to zero in today on the relationship, cultural growth and experience Farmers Insurance has had working with KM Squared. And just to give a little context, the relationship started about a year ago. And basically, as Charlotte will explain, ramped up completely a new program completely from scratch and has really reached unprecedented, unexpected heights in a very short period of time. So culture, when it works, is a real accelerant to success. And with that, Carol, I'd love to hear more from you just to kind of get us started here and kind of setting the context. When we think about cultural experience working with nearshore versus offshore, are there things that come to mind for you? Have you had experience working offshore and nearshore, and what were your expectations going into the relationship that started with KM Squared? And I think, Charlotte, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Were you asking Carol or?
I was asking you, Charlotte, actually. I'm sorry. Did I say Carol? Sorry.
Yes. So what went into?
Yeah, what would be your cultural experience working? Like, what did you expect the nearshore culture to be like prior to arriving? And had you any experience in offshore environments?
So I did have some experience in other nearshore environments. It was in the Caribbean, the West Indies, and culture definitely played into the experience and the level of service we provided. And so as we were seeking out a new nearshore provider, we knew that culture of the country, but most importantly, the partner that we were going to engage with was very, very critical to picking and assigning that relationship. And so I think, that is part of it as you're searching for that nearshore provider, ensuring first and foremost that your culture aligns with that of the business partner that you're going to engage with. And as you stated, the relationship between Farmers and KM Squared is just a little over a year old. But beyond ramping a program, sharing that customer experience and that desire has allowed us to enable and expand services that I didn't even know that we should or could be providing to our customers. So it's been a very exciting ride over the last year.
Fantastic. Well, let's get into that a little bit more, Charlotte. First of all, how would you describe the Farmers' internal work culture?
Yeah, so Farmers Insurance, right? Insurance tells you what we do. We provide insurance products and services to protect your home, auto, small personal things, small businesses. But when we talk about culture and what's important to us, you will not hear speak of the products. The focus is on our customers and our employees. We are committed to bringing peace of mind to our customers and innovating and advocating on their behalf whenever and wherever they need us. So that customer experience is critical to all that we do. And to accomplish this, we feel it's very important and have created a culture of an employee focus. We value the diversity and the potential of every individual in our organization. And we expand that to the BPOs, the partners that we choose to do business with. And that's really the focus of our relationship with KM Squared, is the value that they put on their people and how they treat their people and set them up to be successful to deliver on that customer experience.
I'd love it if you could take us back to the process of your vendor review, I guess maybe 18 months or so ago. Yeah. What is that like as you probe to understand whether the vendor's culture is what you want? And in addition, how much does the country and the country consideration matter in that process?
Yeah, absolutely, Kirk. So it was right before things in the country started shutting down and travel started shutting down. It was the end of February, like that last week in February, first week in March in 2020, when myself and several other members of the Farmers team was on site with KM Squared. And I really, think we spent time with them through the RFP process in many avenues, getting to know each other. I'll say interview process, but it was really beyond an interview process. It was a little bit more like speed dating, right? Digging in, being transparent, trusting from the beginning, and validating that trust to build that relationship to really understand. And I think, traveling and being there, being out on the floor, sharing the experiences, talking to employees of KM Squared, talking to frontline leaders, beyond the executive level interviews and negotiations that were happening, spending time with those people and spending time really getting to know them to see what KM Squared's culture looks like in action.
Very, very interesting. And what did you discover in that process in specific context of KM Squared?
Yeah, I think it goes to that the first piece of advice that I would give when you're looking to identify a BPO that you can do business with is that matching of cultures, the values of your organization. You're never going to find the perfect fit, but what are the things that are most important to you? And can you see and identify those in another organization? And what came to life was the people and the people focus. And you could hear it by the way the individuals were speaking to other clients on the phone while we were walking around, and you could just feel and sense that sense of employee engagement throughout their organization.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So, Jeff, I'd love to bring you into this conversation. Hearing Charlotte describe that, initial process of getting to sort of take a look at KM Squared, talking to agents, walking the floor. She notably, she used the word trust, and, building trust with a new customer is not something you do overnight. But what from your perspective, what did it look like, the evolution of that relationship from where you sit?
Well, Kirk, I mean, just thinking back into what Charlotte just mentioned, if I would present the same question to myself, it really tells me, why the relationship has done so well. We look at, what's our culture like? We believe in having a balanced workforce, one that's filled of inclusion and diversity, and ultimately we believe in our people, right? Our focus is always going to be in the success of our people and the success of our client partners. Ultimately, we're in the people business. And if our people are successful, then we will be successful, and we're going to have good relationships with not just our client partners, but also making sure that we're providing an exceptional customer experience to the end user, right? One of the things that we always focus on is making sure that we're aligned with that culture that our client partner provides. And one of the things that we've done to do that, looking at it with hindsight, is starting early, right? Making sure that we get to know our clients' culture, and we do everything in our power to align with it. First at the leadership level, because at the end of the day, we always need to have that one message, one voice, one message type of approach. And if we can't sync up the culture at a leadership level, then how are we supposed to get that same culture integrated to the rest of the team? So definitely looking back, that was one of the main successes that I think that has taken us or brought us here. Interesting.
Getting back to the process you were describing, Charlotte, I was struck the other day speaking to a customer who's thinking about entering the Nearshore for the first time, and I asked that customer, well, do you have a specific country in mind? And unlike a lot of other customers who start to reel off various countries, they responded with sort of the perspective is we want to work with a provider regardless of location. So in the case that you've experienced working with KM2, landing in the Dominican Republic, and talking about culture, how does the country itself fit into the equation that you have experienced over the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the factors was languages supported. Providing services in the Spanish language was important for our customer base, so that went into our decision. But also we were looking for an area that Nearshore, what Nearshore provides is the ability to travel fairly easily. Current situation notwithstanding, right? But and so the Dominican Republic location provided that to us as well. And the other thing that you saw is really the understanding of American or U.S. culture because of the proximity, TV stations, shopping, those types of things, that there was a base and an understanding of American or U.S. culture.
Got it. And just to take a step back, from the beginning of the program, what specific capabilities were you requiring from a farmer's perspective, and where is the program today?
Yeah, so we were looking to expand chat services primarily, actually, and that was our main focus. Operational efficiency, right? providing support to our customers as they're online interacting with us and they need that self-service help. But what we learned quickly while visiting KM Squared is that we could expand and offer language services to our customers. Previously, we had just been using a translation service vendor. So our rep was on the phone and a translator was interpreting for the two. What we found in KM Squared is a business partner that knows our systems and our products and our services and is trained in our systems and on those products and services and can provide firsthand the customer service support to customers whose language preference is other than English. And that has really changed the game for us with that customer base.
Interesting. And just as a side note, Charlotte, did you, as you entered this new relationship with the Nearshore vendor, how much internal lobbying had to go on, or was your own organization, your own culture, quite open and ready to embrace working more in the Nearshore?
The company was open and ready. When I spoke of our culture and, everyone has a seat at the table and considering all diverse perspectives, our customer base is a reflection of that diversity and inclusion as well. And so we wanted to know, how can we better serve our customers? And what was exciting is that my team, we got to be the first to actually do something about that, which has generated more interest throughout our organization. And so it's just launched what we do next in this area.
Fantastic. Seen that countless times, actually. Mm-hmm. Switching back to you, Jeff. Tell us about, the qualifications of your trainer. I'm sure trainers have a big role to play in creating a consistency in the culture, right? And also, you made a great point, learning your client customer well enough to know how to toggle, how to adapt and shift to in terms of alignment. But what are sort of what are the processes you go through qualifying a trainer? Is there a specific, like an X factor that is important in the training process?
Sure. So, first of all, our recruiting process, especially for that role, is very rigorous because, to your point, it's a very important role. I myself, took a very active role in that hiring process, making sure once I've understood the culture that we were going to be immersed into, finding someone that fit that very well. And, speaking to some of the things that Charlotte mentioned, having that cultural affinity because of the near geological location, right? Dominican Republic, Caribbean area is very close to the continental U.S. So you oftentimes find people that have traveled to the U.S., that have done business or worked in the U.S. and have moved into some of these countries near shore. And that gives them a very big advantage to understanding the culture versus someone that hasn't, right? Being able to watch the same TV shows, wear the same fashion trends, and just be able to relate to family that has lived in the area, right? Even gives you an advantage in how people speak and the subcultures that exist today. So definitely one of the things that I look for is that, right? Have they had that experience? Have they been able to actively mix and mingle with people from the U.S., whether it's because they travel abroad or because they have family that lives in the U.S. What's their personality type? What are their interests? Is it in line in how they communicate? Is how they communicate in line with how our customer, our client communicates? Once we see that that's there, then you want to look at all the other standard things, right? You don't necessarily hire to skills, but you hire to attitudes, right? Is the person that we have in front of us, do they have that attitude where they are serviceable? They want to go above and beyond and make it happen, or do they believe in roadblocks, right? Are they trying to look for a reason or excuse, or are they trying to find a solution, right? And ultimately, those are the people that you want, people that are willing to go to that next level, really push the limit, work as a team, and be able to look for those solutions without me having to maybe point them out. They can observe everything that's going on, and based on that, build solutions, build maybe curricula that our team currently doesn't have, and be able to provide those options, right? One of the things that I think has made us very successful with the farmers team is that there's always an open forum, right? There, everyone has a seat at the table, and there's a lot of, we're allowed to speak up and give suggestions, and say, hey, I've noticed that this is really good, and if we add this to it, it can make it even better. And having that openness from the side of our client partner to really listen and take steps to apply some of those changes, that are being suggested by our trainers or by our front line, has really made a difference in how the culture has been able to just really flourish.
Sure. Well, I'd love to bring Carol into the conversation, and I view you, Carol, as maybe, with Jeff being in production and working very close with Charlotte and her team, you're further upstream in terms of finding the right kind of people. As we often say, this is a people business. Talking about this issue of alignment with culture and the client, how do you see it? What are the steps that have to happen on your side to get where they are in terms of the production experience?
So what we do, and I want to kind of like define or describe what's KM Squared's a corporate culture. As a company, we nurture those who work with the company, and we emphasize interpersonal relationships, communication, and collaboration. So our goal is to have engaged employees who feel valued, supported, and respected, that are very likely to go the extra mile. It's very important the team meets their targets, exceed expectations, and maximize productivity. So with this, we have clearly defined our core values, and they guide every action that the business takes. So going back to your question as to how do we manage this, and especially I'm going to talk across all of our different sites. What we do is that we set the tone through values and goals. So our values and mission statements are all around our offices. So people are constantly reminded and interacting with the one same message. We seek commonality between cultures and manage them by regions that display similar behavioral patterns. We observe, we listen, and care, and we do that a lot. We have to be very aware of their responses to change and how they interact. We do this through daily interactions, coaching sessions, performance reviews. It is very important that management, as Jeff stated before, is aligned, fostering a culture that is inclusive, transparent, and collaborative. So we, as a management team, we lead by example.
Great. I'm going to thank you for that, Carol. I'm going to shift over to some of these great questions. Not surprisingly, very astute questions coming in, which is common in our market. I want to start with this one for you, Charlotte. One of the most critical service skills is empathy, in my experience with nearshore outsourcers. The biggest challenge comes from their talent demographics being very young compared to our U.S. call centers. The affinity to the U.S. is not as much of a challenge culturally as the youthfulness. Young nearshore service agents struggle to empathize with customers in the U.S. Did farmers experience a similar challenge? How does Farmers KM Squared deal with this challenge?
So in short, no, we have not experienced the empathy challenge with KM Squared. I have experienced an empathy challenge in dealing with Nearshore, not with KM Squared. And I think that goes back to the culture, right? The topic that we're talking about today, and how do you align the cultures? And so it comes down to that. And what we saw at KM Squared was a culture focused on people and setting up people to be successful. They hire the right people, they train them. And as Jeff said, we talk about those things on an ongoing basis. And that is really how we overcame it, or how we avoided having an opportunity to address empathy at all.
Great. And let me kind of reposition that question a little bit for you, Jeff, as you manage, well, actually, maybe this one's better for you, Carol, my mistake. The question of managing culture across different sites. So in the question that we just had from our listener, or he was talking about youthfulness in certain locations. Is that a factor at all, or are there other factors to be thinking about as you manage across different sites? Obviously, different countries, sometimes a different orientation toward the service mentality.
Yes, it does. And as it was stated, I mean, nearshoring, that's one of the things that that's great about it. I mean, it offers that cultural affinity with American pop culture, and that will result in better delivery for both our partners and as well as end consumers. Some examples, I mean, what you're stating, let's say, is language, but I'm just going to share a few or specific examples of them. I mean, it's kind of like time zones. Understanding in some countries, there's one time zone for all of the country. So just having them understand kind of like, okay, in the US, we have different time zones. And it's about training, right? So that's where we kind of like get and how we work with people so that they're able to understand assertiveness, for example. Some societies or some cultures recognize assertiveness as being dominant and tough, which is not a bad thing. I mean, being competitive is not a bad thing, but we need to redirect that to being direct, respectful, and value expressing through thought. As you stated, that probably some of our countries are more of a customer service style than others, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they can naturally, I mean, do that job, but it doesn't mean that we can train them for the specific skill that we're searching for. Another one, it's teamwork. I mean, some regions culturally value individualism versus being as collective. So, and language itself, I mean, so even if we have, and we, as Jeff stated, a higher to the language level that we have, there's always going to be these phrases, or there's going to be these words that are very regional or very specific to one part of the country, let's say, where we have to kind of like go back and check what is it that they didn't understand and kind of like rephrase it. At the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot of different examples that we can mention, but it's very important to avoid stereotypes. It's very important to recognize, respect, and embrace every culture. And there's not a single formula to work with, right? So we're always going to go back and forth, and we have to check and work with specific cases to try to understand what and why we have certain behaviors that we'll need to manage further.
Wonderful. I can't agree I can agree so much with what you're saying, especially about the perception sometimes folks who've been around in the nearshore for a very long time will have about certain countries. And that may or may not be true. There's so much deeper meaning to those things. I'm noticing other questions coming in. I want to remind our listeners, our attendees, we'd love to have your thoughts or questions as we got another 15 minutes or so. Jeff, here's one for you. How does KM Squared tackle country personalization other than hiring people that have had contact with the U.S., which can be limiting from a recruiting perspective? For example, do you formally train the Dominican Republican agents about the nuances of U.S. culture? If so, how?
Great question. Great question. I definitely agree that sometimes it can be a challenge or difficult to find specific candidates that fit that profile of have been to the United States or have a direct link to it. However, there are certain things that you can teach. We actually go through a tailor-made introduction and orientation training with all of our new hires, for each of our partners. We actually found that doing this significantly helped prepare the people for success from a cultural perspective, not just for the U.S. culture, but also for that specific program's culture, right? Because each individual program will have its own subculture. We'll use, different vernacular, different word choices. We'll go about doing things differently and just making sure that we load in our training prior to going into the product training, go over this orientation to get them familiarized and conditioned to acting a certain way or responding a certain way to specific stimulus, right? This was actually something that we piloted with our farmers team earlier last year. And because of the success that we had with it, we've actually rolled it out in different programs across different locations because of its success.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. Charlotte, it occurs to me that some years ago, some folks might have seen culture as a soft issue, a bit hard to grasp, a bit intangible. I'm not sure how long you've been around in the vendor management world, but I have great respect for folks I've met who often will talk about, quantifying experience, driving data points to the vendor's performance. But when you migrate into the question of culture, to what degree can you quantify it or measure it or produce data points around that?
Well, that's a really good question, Kirk. I would say those same metrics almost quantify the culture, right? So when Jeff talked about that open table, right? And that is the culture of farmers. Everyone has a seat at the table. We want the diversity and perspective. We want to hear everyone's unique ideas, the different ideas. It includes that we are being diverse in our thought. And what we have found is that focusing on that, the soft side of culture, the intangible side of it, and focusing on the people, we end up with better tangible results because the people are happy, they feel supported, and they understand the vision. I think one of the things maybe I haven't talked much about is, as we're at that table discussing, is as the client, it's also my responsibility to make sure with KM Squared that I am sharing our vision as an organization. What does it look like, that end state? What does it feel like, so that they can be successful in delivering on it? And with KM Squared, when you see those SLAs, right, the calls getting answered and getting answered timely, and when you see the net satisfaction results from the customers and what they're saying about their experience, you can take that qualitative data set from the customer feedback to validate that it is working.
Sure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that same point, Carol, but looking at a different perspective. Do you try? You made some really interesting comments earlier about teamwork. Some cultures are more oriented toward teamwork. Some, countries, cultures are more competitive, I suppose, than others. Are you also thinking about trying to quantify that or drive data points around those elements in each operation?
Yes, definitely. We have been working on collecting data so that can help us support more and for us to be able to kind of like create that single culture or corporate culture that we're looking for. Definitely, yes.
Great. A quick question here. I'm going to go back to you, Charlotte, on work from home. One of our listeners is asking, in a work from home environment, what benefits do you see for Nearshore other than Spanish or Portuguese language?
Yep.
What do you think?
I would put this in maybe two categories. One of that being that cultural aspect, that as an organization, one of our values is to be a good community partner. And so I think first is that aligning with Nearshore partners, it allows us to provide jobs in essence for individuals, professional jobs where they can provide for their families then. And so it's a way of actively participating in the global community. The more hard, how do we measure this, is really the big lump of operational efficiency. So beyond language or time zone, U.S. labor costs compared to nearshore labor costs, there is a difference. That for farmers does not just mean, we're going to save money and bank that, but what we do is we look at it as operational efficiency, and we take those labor savings and reinvest them in technology and tools or other resources that allow us to get better and service our customers better. And that benefits KM squared. So, the tools that we use for managing call flow or chat, it's all about reinvesting that to take our customer service to the next level.
Interesting. Real quick on that, it reminds me, we literally just published a story about an hour ago in Nearshore Americas about conversational AI. When you look at tools and things like conversational AI in general, how do you view it? Do you have an open view on continued improvements in those areas relative to AI and RPA?
There is a place for AI, and I think that it helps the experience in some levels. But I don't feel that AI can replace or take care of a complete customer interaction, right? There's always opportunity for that human involvement. And so AI to help the customer reset their password, right? AI to help a customer get information that they're looking for. But when it comes to consulting and answering questions and understanding opportunities, that's where that human engagement is. And so farmers, we really look at how can AI complement the customer experience or complement the customer experience, not take over the customer experience. Great
point. One other question, I want to direct this at Carol and Jeff. Happy to have you guys comment. So we have an attendee from the Caribbean. She's noting that there's been a lot of growth in BPO contact center activity in the Caribbean, as we all know. And she's asking what is done to increase the adaptabilities of both clients and call center teams in adjusting to this demand. And I think what she's partly getting at is how do Caribbean locations continue to scale in the face of increased demand for services in hiring and things?
Well, one of the things that I can mention about that is that there has to be a partnership with local authorities. For example, schools, whether it's colleges or English schools. There's also, depending on locations, you have even BPO or contact center schools that teach it as a vocation, like a trade, right, or something that they can learn to really get into that industry. So it's partnering with some of those institutions. And I think I said authorities earlier, but I really meant institutions, and partnering with them and letting them know what you're looking for, right? As a BPO in their geo, in their country, and then saying, okay, based on that, let's actively work together to build a profile, build the type of a person, the type of team member that we're looking for, and hold active calibration sessions with them, maybe even build curricula together. And then as they're graduating folks, provide opportunities for these people when we have open houses from a recruiting perspective, being able to have those people come on site and go through the experience, and really working together to see if we can expand our market locally, because the people aren't always going to be readily available, right? So you have to figure out a way where you can create your own farming system, right? So to speak, like in the major leagues, right? Where you're taking people that have what it takes, they have the right attitudes, back to that, right, that we mentioned earlier, and that they have the willingness to learn and pick up the skills. And based on that, if you find the right partner, you could definitely use that to help scale the business.
Thank you for that, Jeff. And real quick, just back to you, Carol, there is another listener asking about literacy rates and also low levels of attrition. I imagine what Jeff was talking about in terms of cultivating folks, thinking about them, that must contribute to low levels of attrition. But what's your perspective?
Yes, definitely. I mean, that contributes to finding that profiles and meeting those profiles, as he mentioned. It's very important that there's an alignment of understanding kind of like what kind of agents or what kind of employees are we looking for, and then just match them to those areas. There's a lot of potential in those areas, definitely. Great.
Well, and just real quick, we have had one listener ask about nearshore versus offshore. It's a really, really great topic, and I encourage you to read Nearshore Americas. We have dozens of stories on that particular theme. There's many, many rich conversations available comparing nearshore to offshore. But on that note, I do want to thank our speakers today, especially Charlotte, for making time for us. I know you're very busy, but I think all of you have really given our listeners a great deal of value and things to think about. And it's really great to hear the success you've had. So again, I want to thank you for your time, and for listeners also for your time. I know you're all really busy, and it's a beautiful day up here in the Northeast. So thanks again, and we'll see you at the next Nearshore Americas webinar. Have a great day.